could use the authority skill on his own friends, causing all their stats to decrease by 50%. Now, how would they survive in future rounds? Youngman, attempting to justify himself, replied that he didn't have a choice. Black Scythe himself had given him the order, and if he hadn't followed Black Scythe's command, he would have been killed. So, he claimed he had no choice in the matter. His friend, annoyed and still furious, retorted that Youngman should have chosen to die rather than harm his friends. He said that someone who, just because they were at risk of dying, would harm their friends was no true friend. Youngman hadn't even tried to find a way to convince Black Scythe otherwise or explore alternative options. Instead, he had blindly followed Black Scythe's orders and used the authority skill, indicating that he didn't care about what happened to his crew members and friends. His friend told Youngman that if he wanted to learn about true friendship, he should watch One Piece. And now Youngman could go and die in a gutter, because they were no longer friends. Youngman listened to this in silence, but then Youngman, also shouting and tapping his chest while addressing his friend angrily, replied that he was also affected, as his stats got decreased by 50% because he was the zone leader and failed to protect the Crystal Ruin. However, his friend cut him off mid-sentence and started shouting at Youngman again, accusing him of playing the I am also a victim card. His friend emphasized that all of this had happened because Youngman was greedy. Youngman had been obsessed with getting the authority skill to confront Aaron, and this was all he used to talk about. His friend continued to curse Youngman, while Youngman could do nothing but listen with an annoyed and frustrated expression. Then, Youngman tried to say something about figuring out how to get their stats back, but his friend cut him off once more. His friend stated that, as he had mentioned before, Youngman could go and die in a gutter, and from that day on, they were no longer friends. His friend made it clear that Youngman should not call or try to contact him. He warned Youngman that if they ever met in the real world or the other world, he might be tempted to kill Youngman out of anger. With that final warning, his friend ended the call, leaving Youngman standing there silently, glaring at his phone screen. Then, in frustration, Youngman immediately started dialing his other friend's number, stating that he would command all his other buddies to crush the friend who had just called him. However, each and every one of his friends had already blocked his number, and he was unable to contact a single friend. Frustrated, Youngman threw his phone onto his bed and glared at it in anger. He said he didn't need anyone to live his life, as only pigs and sheep roam in groups, and tigers move alone. He considered himself a tiger, even though his stats had decreased by 50%. Grinding his teeth, Youngman vowed to rip each of their body parts one by one, torture them until they begged to die, and then kill each and every one of his buddies, reducing them to pieces of shit. The scene then shifts back to the Imperial Hotel, where the Heavenly Demon is staying. We see the bodyguard bowing his head politely, and the Heavenly Demon, casually dressed in his usual black t-shirt and pants, sitting in his office chair. He complimented the bodyguard for passing the third round and expressed relief that he was alive. However, the bodyguard, maintaining his polite tone, replied that he was just lucky and that he had passed the third round because the monsters were weakened, making it easier to deal with them. The Heavenly Demon then asked the bodyguard about his current level and whether he had managed to obtain a class. The bodyguard replied, still maintaining his polite tone, that he had reached level 11 and had been fortunate enough to acquire the class of Knight. Then the bodyguard said that Aaron had also reached level 11, but she got a rather unique class called Summoner. Hearing the term Summoner, the Heavenly Demon became curious and asked the bodyguard to explain this in detail. The bodyguard raised his hand and, with a serious face, started explaining that, at first, he himself had been surprised. Now, Aaron can summon